So if you've got an airsoft tank, it's got one of these in it. This is your basic airsoft unit. This is a brand new one. This is a replacement unit. This is how they come. This wire is snapped off the motor. I'll have to solder that back on later. But it comes like this, and if your unit has failed, which they don't do as much as they used to. The airsoft units that they have now are much, much better than they were just a few years ago. More powerful and more reliable. But if one fails and you need to replace it, you get a replacement unit. Most of the time when they fail, it's the seal. You got the airsoft unit itself, you've got the motor, and then you've got this little rubber seal. And this little rubber seal is in the end of there, and that's what holds the BB right before it fires. We'll get to that in a minute. But a lot of times that'll be what fails, and you can still hear the motor running. That tells you that the motor's good. So if I've got to replace the unit and I know the motor's good, I don't mess around with all this. When you pull the unit out of the tank, it will have a plastic piece on it right here, and the wires will be underneath that, and it's got a tab on it that holds the motor in place. That plastic piece is held in with just one screw, which screws into that hole right there. So you pull that screw, you pull that plastic piece off of there. You can get yourself something of the appropriate size, like a Phillips head screwdriver is a number 1. Go right on the shaft of the motor in the middle of the brass gear, and just push gently, and it'll pop right out of there. There, no problem, okay? And then do that to both units, the new one and the old one. Then the one that's still wired in the tank, you pop that in there, just push gently till it stops. Okay, now that one popped right into place. Once in a while, I'll do this, I'll make it do it so you guys can see. Once in a while you'll push gently till it pops, stops, and then you'll look in there and you'll see that the brass gear is up against the plastic gear, but they're not meshed. If that happens, all you got to do is take the back side of a hobby blade and just move that gear over a little bit, and it'll pop right in there, okay? And then push again, just gently, till it stops. And then you're good to go. Your motor's in place. Now you can reinstall in your turret and go back to blazing away. Another thing on these that has a tendency to give guys problems is the trigger switch. That goes back here. That's what you need to adjust. We'll get to what makes it trigger in a second, but if it's too far apart, it won't give you sound and track and barrel recoil, and if it's too close together, it just might keep going and going and going and not wanting to stop. So let's take a quick look inside one of these bad boys and see what's going on. We're not going to take the brand new one apart. So I already got to solder a wire back on. So when you take the unit apart, carefully, got to be careful. That spring will pop on you if you're not careful. Okay, so when you take it apart, it's got about 5 or 6 screws in the outside. I like to gently start. It doesn't just fall apart. You'll have to put some pressure on it. I like to reach in there and make sure that spring is in place, and then get my thumb underneath and onto the spring itself, and then pull the top off just to be safe. But it stays in there pretty good. So you've got some main components in here. You've got your chamber, your bolt, your piston, and your spring. Okay. Now everything starts down here in the bottom. That's where your motor goes in. The motor goes in just like that, and that brass gear that we looked at, you'll be able to see it right there. That starts spinning, moves this whole train, ends with this rack right here. This rack and this arm are what do the work. The gear train and the sector gear move the rack, and the arm is moved by a little pin that sticks out of this last gear, okay? So when everything gets to going and it starts to turn, here's your components. Let me take them out of here. You got your spring, your bolt and piston, and your chamber, okay? Now, there's a spring right here that comes through the unit on the other side, and you'll see it there. And what that is for is to keep tension on the bolt, because we're going to need it in a second here. So the motor gets to spinning, and the rack starts moving. And the rack is moving the piston, and the little tab on the gear is moving this lever. So it's pulling the bolt and the piston back together. Pulls it back until it's got enough clearance for a BB right here to drop into the chamber. Okay. Then the lever slips off the tab, and the spring makes the bolt snap forward and push that BB up into that rubber seal. Okay, and see there's a BB in there. and it's going to sit there for just a fraction of a second, because while all that was going on, the rack was still moving back and still pulling the piston. And when it gets the piston all the way back, the rack slips off the sector gear, and that big spring slams the piston forward and shoots a jet of air out of that tiny little tube right there, right into the back of the BB. That blows it past the rubber seal, down the barrel, and off to terrorize the neighborhood squirrels. So it's really pretty simple. It just pulls the bolt and piston back together, lets the bolt go to chamber a BB, lets the piston go to provide the air, and boom, you're on your way. I'd ask if there are any questions, but, well, you know how that goes. See you next time.